So Penn State gets it done 30-13. Hey, look, good teams win, great teams cover. It was certainly gritty, not pretty. We're going to discuss if there's a little bit of cause for concern going up against the likes of Iowa after Penn State does improve to 3-0 against Illinois in today's contest.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, coming to you live here on YouTube. This is your post-game show. We want to hear from you, whether that's about Illinois, Iowa, any of the upcoming games, because now Penn State, at least it looked like they were in a really good position to go up against the Hawkeyes of Iowa. But now we're here after an Illinois game that they showed they pushed back quite a bit against the Penn State Nittany Lions. We're going to jump into all of it. Zane Brancefield is going to be joining me on the show as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Now new customers can bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Let's open it up here with Penn State and Illinois. So that is that first takeaway is the gritty, not pretty. Okay, the offense had trouble getting it going. The defense, some days, okay, Penn State is going to get into a situation where the defense is going to be giving up maybe 30, 40 points. Let's hope that doesn't happen, right? I don't want to see Penn State have 40 points put up against them. But Ohio State and Michigan do come to mind when you think about it. And Maryland is probably going to be tougher. I would say probably in the 30-point range, unless the defense is really able to step up. But I don't know if it was the road jitters. I don't know if Penn State was looking ahead towards the Iowa game, because Iowa right now is a lot better than Illinois. And don't get me wrong, college football athletes, and you see it in the pros as well, that Penn State was certainly in a position to look ahead to the whiteout game. The Hawkeyes are supposed to be the Big Ten West team. They're supposed to represent that side of the conference in a Big Ten championship. So Penn State, yeah, it's the 1-0 mentality, but man, don't try to sit back and tell me like Iowa is not a more high profile game than Illinois. But you got to take care of business in the game in the week that you're in. Okay, Illinois played well. If it wasn't for 5 turnovers, they played scrappy. They played good for where they are, because Kansas obliterated them. Illinois was playing far from behind. That game was out of reach. The only reason it was 34-23 was because of garbage time. And then they went up against Toledo. Toledo's a very good MAC team. I'll give them that. And Toledo, frankly, should have won, which led me back to sit and say, okay, Penn State is going to have its way with Illinois. And defensively, they did. Offensively, the problem wasn't Illinois' offense, okay? The problem was Illinois' defense. Kansas was able to break off. Their running backs were averaging 10 yards per carry. And I thought that Penn State, given that they'd be up by a lot of points, they did lead 30-7 at one point, but there were times where I sat back and I said, Penn State needs to be ahead by more than what they are. You were +3 in the turnover margin after the first quarter, and the score was only 13-0. This game should have gotten out of hand. Illinois' offense does commit a lot of turnovers, but they can move the football. It's the defense that has no business stopping anybody. Toledo ran all over them, scored 28 points. A MAC team, may I remind you, that game was 30-28. Illinois had to come from behind. The Jayhawks put up 34 points, no problem, and they were so effective of running on the ground. This should have been a Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen type of day. The offensive line should have had their way with the way that Illinois is so committed to man coverage. They have extra defensive backs out there, but that extra defensive back is committed to stopping the run. At least they were this time around. They ran single high safety. So Penn State, it really should have been a situation where it was pick your poison, and the ground game, you want to start and finish with that. Now, the difference here for this Penn State team, what they would have had problems closing it out a couple years ago. 2021, we saw that, right? With 9 overtimes, but The difference between other Penn State teams in the past and this year's Penn State team is the fact that they are able to close these games out. They can dictate time of possession, they can control the pace of the game, and they can just grind it out. Illinois' defense essentially collapsed because of how long they were on the football field. Even though Penn State, yes, in the third quarter, there were some quick 3-and-outs, but over the course of that game, and the turnovers by the offense certainly didn't help the Fighting Illini. But Penn State just kept extending drives, extending drives, extending drives. And then Penn State would shoot itself in the foot with stupid penalties. I was really shocked with the way that Devon Ellies and Keandre Lambert-Smith, of all guys, would really allow Illinois to extend its drive to put Penn State in a 3rd-and-18 situation when they were really driving the football. So the defense saved the day. 5 turnovers, 4 interceptions. You take the entire confidence away from what Illinois is trying to do offensively, because at times they were able to move the football. I am concerned about the fact that Penn State did fall asleep periods of time in the game. Arm tackles, veteran players, to see Keaton Ellis, linebackers just whiffing on Illinois players. This Illinois offense is not good. Luke Altmaier is a poor decisive quarterback. He makes poor decisions. Good athlete. He can run. Him getting banged up in the middle of the game, I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh, well, thank goodness he was hurt. Thank goodness he got injured. That's not what I'm here to say. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. Believe me, I was sweating when Drew Allar hit his hand on Johnny Newton's helmet. And Johnny Newton was a problem from start to finish. And they left him in the game for a long time. I would have taken him out. That is an NFL player that you saw on display here on Saturday for Illinois. But Altmaier not being 100% definitely helped Penn State defensively. There wasn't that threat of the run anymore. Illinois had a solid game plan to start. Horizontally spread Penn State's defense out, use Luke Altmaier's legs to your advantage. I was impressed with not necessarily Josh McCray, but Reggie Love had a decent day on the ground. And Illinois, for that good portion, up until late in the second quarter, before Penn State scored that final field goal, 16-7. Yeah, it felt like Illinois was a little too much in this game, even with the +3 turnover margin. So Penn State does have some things to clean up. I think being on the road, it was an emotional game. You could see it. Both sides were getting penalized for unsportsmanlike conduct. Plays were extending after the whistle was blown. The Nittany Lions and the Fighting Illini definitely remember that 9 overtime game, and it's a matter of protecting Illinois' bragging rights, and then Penn State getting that revenge. So it was a highly emotional game, but it led to undisciplined plays. So let's just kind of give an overview of what I saw today. The defense I'm glad the defense had a coming out party. 5 turnovers. You make that Illinois offense look silly, and you did it seemed like everybody had an interception. Everybody had a turnover. They could have had more, really. They could have had 7 takeaways. Zach Wheatley missed out on an interception. Dom DeLuca missed out on another one. They should have had so much. I would have said upwards of 8. There were fumbles that were called that were just called down by contact or incomplete. And Penn State really could have buried the Fighting Illini further than what it was. 30-13 does not tell what the box score says. But I think that Penn State, unlike years past, they were able to wear this opponent down. This was a road game. That was a tougher environment in Champaign than people are going to give them credit for. And everyone's probably going to complain and say that, well, Penn State, they didn't win 50-0. Are they really a college football playoff contender? It is coming away with these kinds of wins that make me feel better about Penn State than I would have in the past. How about Florida State nearly losing to Boston College? Florida State's supposed to be the number 2 team in the country, right? Or they're supposed to be at least top 5. Polls have teams all over the place, but Florida State beat LSU convincingly. And then you almost lose to Boston College 31-29. Penn State didn't have that issue. They were in control late in the third quarter, and that's what you wanted in a road environment. So I don't sit back and say the time is to hit the panic button about Penn State. Sure, there's things they need to clean up. Don't commit those penalties. Capitalize more on those turnovers. Play calling was questionable at points in time. You're at the T formation. T formation works almost every single time, at least it feels like. Illinois did very well against defending the run. The run game's got to get it going. I really don't know what's going on when you have 2 first-round picks in Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen, and those guys aren't able to just maximize their abilities, their talent. The offensive line, the wide receivers, there's specific plays that I take away from that game, And I'm trying to figure out, why isn't Singleton breaking off the run? Yeah, he had the touchdown. Katron Allen was able to break his way through the line of scrimmage, shoulder some defenders, and really had to do extracurricular stuff to get some bigger plays. But it wasn't. You look at the wide receivers, you look at the additional blocking, the double team, and then you peel off from the line of scrimmage from the offensive line, and they are just not, they're not getting off their blocks. Wide receivers aren't doing enough to block for Penn State. And that's why the tight ends, everyone's saying tight ends aren't utilized enough. That's very true, because they haven't been able to go out wide and be pass catchers, because the blocking's just not what it is. So don't criticize Singleton and Allen if you're thinking that. Be critical of the offensive line, and more so of the wide receivers as well, because the wide receivers aren't doing their assignments. And it's why Penn State has to dial it back in with what Mike Yurcich really wants to do: more 3 wide receiver sets. Tight ends go out and catching more passes. Tyler Warren had a touchdown catch. Theo Johnson did have some plays. Nicholas Singleton was the leading wide receiver today, oddly enough. But when you get him in open space, look what he can do with the football. We saw more of that 22 personnel, where 2 running backs are on the football, whether it's 21, 22, it doesn't matter. 2 running backs were on the field at the same time, Singleton and Allen, and there was that fake to Allen and that dump off to Nicholas Singleton in the flat. And I'm like, that is textbook. So the everydayers knew that one was coming, and they broke it out today. You're going to see that more against the likes of Iowa. You're going to see that definitely against Michigan and Ohio State, where Penn State is going to add more wrinkles. Illinois had to do so much to remain competitive in today's game, from a scheme standpoint, to hide stuff on film. And for Penn State, on the pregame show that I did as solo, if you watch the preview, okay, the score wasn't right. I get that. But Penn State did cover. They did win, right? And they took control late in the game, and you never had to look back. For Penn State, they could run the same base offense and not do anything additional, go on the road against a Big Ten opponent that was up for this game, and still came away with the success that they did. Penn State didn't do anything crazy. They didn't reinvent the wheel. For the Fighting Illini, for Brett Bielema, they had to. They had to do so much additional stuff away from their traditional game plan just to remain competitive. And that's the difference between Penn State teams in the past and why they are a college football playoff contender. So they win 30-13. That's the overview of it. We're going to have more specific takeaways. The defense, we're going to start with them, because they're overall, they're the MVP. It was huge to get a guy like Daquan Hardy back. Keziah Izzard played a lot. So I'm glad those guys are healthy. Zane Brancefield is waiting behind the scenes. He's going to join me in the upcoming segment. Let's hear from one of our sponsors on today's episode, and that is Athletic Brewing Company, because we're going to have a game changer from the performance between Penn State and Illinois, 30-13, as I mentioned, because Athletic Brewing Company is changing the game when it comes to non-alcoholic beers. That's right. You get the tastiest beverages that are non-alcoholic. So brews, IPAs, everything, you name it, from Athletic Brewing Company. And Penn State had the game changer was the defense. Okay. I could pick out Daquan Hardy, the pressure in the face, Abdul Carter, really anybody else. I'm going to give it to Daquan Hardy just because first game back, he gets an interception. Johnny Dixon had one as well. You could pick anybody on the defense, but like Penn State's defense being a game changer today against Illinois, Athletic Brewing Company is your game changer when it comes to non-alcoholic beers. So now take advantage of this offer, because there's 50 styles of craft non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, golden sours, and more. And with Locked On, you can go visit Athletic Brewing Company's website and use the promo code Locked On for 15% off your first order at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Locked On Nittany Lions is your go-to podcast for HappyValleyInsider.com. Penn State rivals will have the recaps, analysis for this game, and previews of Penn State and Iowa, because now it's all about Iowa, 1-0, 1-0, 1-0 as they move on. And let's welcome in Zane Brancefield to open up segment number 2. And Zane, it's a win. A win's a win. Gritty, not pretty. I want to start off with the defense here, because Penn State, the 5 turnovers definitely helped, to say the least, Zane, about this. So when you watch that game, even if Penn State doesn't get the 4 interceptions and the 1 fumble, did they still win this game in this kind of manner? Or did the turnovers really bail them out today?
I don't think the turnovers really did that much, because if we really watch the game back, they got the turnovers, but it wasn't like we really capitalized or scored many touchdowns off of them. So I think it was just like, yeah, it was good. It looks good on a box score, but I don't think that really changed the game as much as what people think it did.
Yeah, at Penn State, I mean, just at times, really, the offense is the concern, the struggles, and we see your comments and we encourage you. So I'm going to save this one when we move into the third segment because it is about the offense. We see your comment, Chris. I want people to share their thoughts in the chat because this is your post game show. We want you to have the conversation with us. Defensively, at times they were a little lackluster tackling. It was that drive down the field when Penn State's up 13-0. Really felt like they should have been up maybe by 10 more points, something in the neighborhood of 24-0. They did have that blocked field goal, if you remember. Jerzon Newton, Johnny Newton, Jay Newton, whatever you want to call him, was exceptional. He is an NFL player. He's going to be playing on Sundays, and he'll probably be a first-round pick. Penn State had to deal with that. But he was a matchup problem for Olu Fashanu. He was a matchup problem for the guards. Anywhere they moved him around in that 3-4 defense. But the defense for Penn State, they were able to get after Luke Altmaier. They forced Illinois out of their comfort zone. They were able to Penn State's biggest strengths and Illinois' biggest weakness is when they have to play from behind. And Penn State's able to send those Manny Diaz blitzes. They're allowed to get creative with coverage. At times, Luke Altmaier looked really confused. They were able to bait and switch him with the defensive looks. So Manny Diaz, being the defensive coordinator of this team, is a huge plus and why they're able to be in the top 5 conversation when it comes to college football. So against teams like Illinois, yes, you are supposed to get 5 turnovers. But I do think just because the offense didn't do enough today. They were able to sustain some drives, but they got turned away right at the goal line at the 2 when they had 3 opportunities. I don't know why you're throwing a fade route. I know it's not a design fade, but I don't know why you're trying to drop it over the shoulder of Katron Allen. That should be Theo Johnson. That should be Tyler Warren. When you're in the T formation on the left side of the line of scrimmage towards the left hash, why are you running counter sweeps? Why are you running sweep plays to the short side of the field where there's going to be a million bodies trying to just piling up in front of you? Okay, Jerzon Newton did a really good job of adjusting the line of scrimmage for Illinois. But Zane, I'm watching that scheme and I'm saying, pitch it to Nicholas Singleton to run to the far side of the field. Let his track speed beat all those Illinois defenders to the pylon. Why are you taking away your best assets in Singleton and forcing him into the short side of the field? Even Katron Allen, just run to the far side of the field and let it open up. It felt like Penn State bottled itself up and contained itself when it didn't have to. But that I'm already getting into the offense here. I'm already getting out of line because I do want to discuss the offense further because if anything, it was the offense. 5 turnovers gives you essentially, if you convert on most of them, I would say that Penn State could have had 20 more points added to its total based on the 5 turnovers. You're assuming if they convert a touchdown on all 5 of them, that's 35 points. But let's just add another 20. Okay, this game should have been 50 to 30 the way that the defense played. But Daquan Hardy gives you a huge boost. Keziah Izzard, I did not realize. I want to give Keziah Izzard his due justice here. He makes the defensive line, he allows the depth chart to be a little more expansive. He allows guys to get breaks. His presence is more important than people think. And he's always kind of been a co-starter, or at least someone who's gotten valuable snaps when he has been on the football field. And it feels like because he struggled to be on the football field in 2022 with injuries, he was out for blue and white. And you're like, man, these injuries just keep lingering. And then for the start of the season, you missed him for the first 2 games. But Keziah Izzard offers a lot of value here, Zane, to the defensive line, whether people want to necessarily admit it or not. It just gives guys an extra breather, and he is talented. So I'm glad that Izzard. I had to remind myself, I'm like, who's 99 out there? I don't see him a lot. It's Keziah Izzard, and he played valuable snaps today. Was able to allow defenders just to get in the face of Luke Altmaier, or John Paddock. And that's going to be important moving forward is the availability of Keziah Izzard, Daquan Hardy, and Amin Vanover. Amin Vanover is much better against the run than he is against the pass. He's more of an edge setter, like a Nick Tarburton to offer the comparison. That's just what he is. He's a strong side defensive end that can set the line, it can set the edge of the line of scrimmage. So those 3 guys being available when you play Iowa, when you play Ohio State, when you play Michigan, become much more important. So it was good to see them back today.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the defensive line I actually thought was like the most solid part of the defense today. Like, yeah, we got interceptions and which is good, and they had good coverage, but like our linebackers, I didn't think did like a great job. Like you said before, their tackling wasn't great. There was a couple plays where we would have like three guys go after the
Mhm.
Illinois offensive guy, and they just let him keep running. Like you mentioned before, like we would have them on like third and long, and then they would just get another like 10, 15 yards, and like that's unacceptable for a Penn State defense. And I just think Penn State's linebackers need to get better at tackling and need to like read that offense a little bit better. Like Luke Altmaier can run, he's going to
Mhm.
throw the ball if he's not running. So like find her in between. Like Abdul Carter played incredible with pressure, even though he didn't have like a bunch of sacks. He was in on pressure like every single time, which you can't ask for him to do anything else when it forces Altmaier to throw a short pass and then
Yeah.
they just let the ball get through. Like you can't do that. And I think that's what killed Penn State the most. I think the way Illinois played, besides the interceptions, I think they should have had a lot more points because they came out
Yeah.
swinging, and
Yeah.
our defense I didn't think was that good. But Penn State won, so like you can't be upset about that. But I think Manny Diaz is going to have a strict target to the defense this week.
I mean, I would say the biggest concern about the defense, and this is what I tried to point out, follow us both on X, on Twitter, just to kind of have those in-game thoughts. And I'm just kind of, whatever comes to mind, I'm trying to throw it off so that people can have those conversations live in the moment in the game. And you're able to do this a little more with a road game because so many things, being at the home games, being at Beaver Stadium, but just kind of observing this on the TV and in the moment. And Penn State, I would say my biggest criticism of today, the bend don't break defense, that works, that's great. But at times, Penn State had Reggie Love, Josh McCray, Luke Altmaier in the backfield. Those tight ends, those wide receivers, it really didn't matter. Anybody that touched the football for Illinois. And my biggest concern, criticism of the day was that should have been a loss on the play. That should have been -1, -2 on the play for Illinois. Instead, somehow it turned into a 10-yard plus game. The one where it was Illinois had 3rd and 18 and they were deep in their own territory. And then they faked like they were going to go for it on 4th down. And that was the nail in the coffin. If they decided to do that, didn't get the first down, Penn State probably would have had a few more points. And I think the momentum would have really shifted and it could have gotten even further out of him. But Illinois knew what it was doing by just trying to see what they could do with the hard count. But why did Reggie Love almost get a first down on an obvious draw play? You knew it was coming from a mile away, and players were there to make the stop after 1 to 2 yards, and yet somehow he almost gets the first down. I think it was 3rd and 22, and he picked up 20 yards on the play. That was the unacceptable part. It was that drive where Illinois down 13-0. They strung a couple big plays together. Again, Penn State in the backfield at the line of scrimmage, making a play on the player. And then somehow that guy is 5 to 10 yards up the field. That should have been a loss of 2. And yet somehow it's flipped into a gain of 8. And then, so clean up some tackling, clean up the penalties by veteran players, might I remind you, specifically Ellies and Lambert Smith. And then things will be all right. I really just, and James Franklin knows that you got to win. They won they won the turnover battle. That's why they won today's game. Okay. The big play battle, if you look back and forth, that when it meets I would say it's about dead even when who won the big play battle and then the penalty battle. I can pull it up because I have the stats here and we'll just, I got to go to the team stats as an overall. But when it came to penalties, and so I have it up now, Penn State committed 7 penalties for 70 yards. Illinois, 6 penalties for 47. You lost the penalty battle, and that's why Illinois was even around in this game because that not only gives yards to Illinois, it gives them momentum too. Okay, so that if I'm going to criticize the defense about anything, that's really what I have. But 5 turnovers really makes up for it. Zane, it does.
It definitely does. I agree with you. But that penalties, yeah, you can't give up 70 yards worth of penalties. And James Franklin's
No.
is a big for that too. So I know he's gonna be pushing for that next week to not have that happen again.
Well, Zane, we're going to get into the offense, and then we'll ultimately pivot into just kind of wrapping up Illinois and Penn State, talking a little bit about Iowa, and getting an early impression on the Hawkeyes, who mean, Wisconsin struggled with Georgia Southern today. I got to imagine that the Hawkeyes are the favorites to take the Big Ten West, but some people disagree. They still think it's Wisconsin. So that's what's on the way. But we are going to talk in depth about the offense. I've kind of already said my piece with them, but I definitely have more. Let's hear from one of our sponsors of today's episode, and that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers, take advantage of this offer from FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On, #1 sportsbook in America, because new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. What's not to love about that offer? All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com/locked on to take advantage of that. FanDuel, #1 sportsbook in America, the official sports betting partner of the NFL. And Locked On College Football Kickoff Live appears every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. I was a special guest on the show. You can check out that segment on the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcast. And I'm glad it wasn't so much focused about a preview between Penn State and Illinois. It was understanding why Penn State was a college football playoff contender. So go check out that segment. It's about 10 minutes to get a better understanding of why Penn State is a top 4 team in the country. I know it didn't look pretty against Illinois, but 30-13, it is these kinds of games where you have to win ugly to keep preserving that undefeated record. 2-3 years ago, Penn State doesn't close out this game necessarily. This year, you never had to worry about it. Maybe the cover was in doubt, right? Good teams win, great teams cover. But other than that, once when we got towards the end of the third quarter, I knew it's completely out of reach for Illinois to try to make a comeback in this. So you could kind of just sit back and say, well, Penn State won, but now where do you go from here? And that's where we are. The offense. So we have plenty of comments coming in. Let's start with Chris, and I hope people were patient. This offense is one of the most loaded offenses in the country in terms of talent, and it's frustrating to me that it's not being utilized. Chris, appreciate the comment, and let's get the conversation started that way. The offense looked rough, Zane. That's pretty much says it all. Keandre Lambert-Smith was underutilized. I don't know if the penalty affected him in terms of mentally. Where was Trey Wallace in all of this, right? I feel like Penn State didn't have Trey Wallace not being available, it just in the middle of the game really hindered a Penn State offense. And then Nicholas Singleton's your leading wide receiver. So what's going on here? That the Drew Allar missed some passes. I missed Theo Johnson wide open in the end zone. The aerial attack and the ground game, they have a balanced offense. So I'm glad Chris brought this up, but it was frustrating to see them work. But again, they were able to grind the Illinois defense to a halt and just tire them out, which worked on a day like today.
Honestly, I don't think it was just as much about like the receiving end of the offense that was struggled. I think the biggest thing was the blocking, because like blocking in general, like either Drew Allar didn't have time to make a good read, because I thought his reads were pretty poor today, like overall, despite like even though having like 48% completion, but also like even the wide receiver blocking like was ridiculous. And like that one play that Katron Allen was going up, he was at like the 5-yard line, and JB Nelson decides to run into him. Like, what in the world was going on there? And there was just other blocking plays. Like, no wonder Nick Singleton and Katron Allen couldn't get any yardage, because the offensive line couldn't open up any holes. There was a couple plays they should have probably bounced it back outside, but they just didn't have time to, or just didn't see the hole. And they couldn't even get many yardage. Like, having neither of our running backs to get 100 yards is crazy, because they're both talented enough to do that. But, like, yes, the offensive line, they're big, they're strong, but a great offensive line in the Big Ten is going to be able to know what offensive plays they're running and be able to push one side or the other and make gaps for their running backs. And Penn State offensive line, like, yeah, it looks good on paper, and like guys like JB Nelson, Hunter Norzad, and Olu Fashanu, obviously, but if you can't make a hole or block for your running backs, or give Drew Allar just that other like half second to make that good pass, like, I think you're failing in that sense. And even like when the wide receivers get down the field, if a guy's going to catch the ball, the other wide receiver should be blocking for him to get that other, like that extra run after catch yards. Like, you got to figure out that blocking scheme. But if you're going to win the Big Ten, that's your first thing you got to work on.
Well, I'm wondering what the biggest issue is, and here's another interesting comment. The run blocking isn't getting any better. They're wasting Singleton and Allen. Well, the run blocking certainly isn't getting any better. I feel like Jerzon Newton and Randolph, the law firm for Illinois, right? That's what they've done, dubbed themselves. They did a good job, did a great job today against Illinois, against Penn State along the line of scrimmage. Olu Fashanu at times looked, I don't know. That's a top 5 franchise tackle, right? That's supposed to be. You can have bad games, right? Okay, Olu Fashanu, and you can even have bad plays, but those bad plays were occurring a little too frequently for the offensive line. Olu Fashanu did not have his best game. Newton a little too much for whether it was JB Nelson, and they moved him everywhere. So Caden Wallace, Sal Wormley, Hunter Norzad, they got the fullest test today of what you're probably going to see more so against Ohio State and Michigan is a talent like Newton, and he can go all 4 quarters. I'm surprised they kept him out there as long as they did. Even when he got a little banged up, I said, okay, now you got to take Newton out of the game. No, Bo Prabula's in now, and Newton's still out there making plays. And I'm like, what is Illinois doing at this point if they think that if there's any value of keeping him in the game at this point? But the run blocking is not getting any better. It is on the wide receivers too, specifically whether it was Dante Cephas or Keandre Lambert-Smith. I remember a play specifically where Dante Cephas just let his man go. The guy shed the block. I don't know what defensive back it was, but couldn't take him out of the play. The defensive back sheds Cephas and makes the tackle on Singleton. And I'm like, well, this is the problem. This is why these explosive plays aren't developing, because the wide receivers aren't able to do enough blocking downfield. So it's not just the first 5 guys up front for Penn State. The offensive line definitely needs to do a better job. But if you're going to break those long 70-plus yard touchdowns that we know Singleton can do, that shows the value of what a veteran like Mitchell Tinsley, Parker Washington were able to do a season ago, because Keandre Lambert-Smith was still on the team, and he's kind of guilty of those blocking problems by the wide receivers collectively. But you see a significant drop-off from a season ago of those big rushing plays. What's the difference? Mitchell Tinsley's not there, and neither is Parker Washington. So you got to give some blame to the wide receivers, and it's why the tight ends are staying more into block, because not everyone is doing their job on the run plays. They need Theo Johnson and Tyler Warren to be extra blockers rather than extra receivers, and it's just kind of disappointing to this point after 3 games. And the way that Illinois plays defense with now, I thought they were going to have more success on the ground game because Kansas obliterated them on the ground. Toledo, 30-28 was the final, but Toledo controlled most of that game. Why couldn't Penn State have had that success the way that they did? But it is because the ground game is just not doing what it's supposed to do. So don't put it on Singleton and Allen. They are doing everything that they can to try to get into open space. But Penn State fans, and we're just going to have to be patient about the development of the ground game.
Yeah, Penn State just needs those good role players like we had last year. You mentioned Parker Washington, Mitchell Tinsley, also Brenton Strange, who was a fantastic blocker.
He's one of the best blocking tight ends you'll see at Penn State. I can
So
say that. Yeah,
that's where it gets difficult with Tyler Warren and Theo Johnson. Yes, they both have really good hands and they can catch the ball, and I think Theo's a better blocker than Tyler, but either way today, neither of them super really shined in that blocking scheme. And you got to figure out how you're going to block. Like you said about Dante Cephas, just giving up on the play. That's a really fast way to just get benched the rest of the game in James Franklin's eyes, because he wants you to go to 110%. So they need all their guys to play, especially if you're missing Trey Wallace. You got to, whether it be Malik McClain or Dante Cephas or Lambert-Smith, if he doesn't have the ball, they just got to block for their guys. Like you said, Nick and Katron, they were getting banged up today. There was nothing they could do. They were fighting for every yard they got. And a couple plays they really pushed just to get that extra yard or two. And it's they did good. It's you can't ask them to do much better when nobody's helping them out. It's not a one-man show, and you need those role players. You look at basketball teams, even to build a good dynasty, you have those good role players, and Penn State football needs those guys. That's where this year's team has more talent than last year's Penn State football team, but it's star power right now, and we need people to just figure out what their roles are so we can take the next step.
All right, that's going to do it for part 1 of this post-game show, and we're going to pivot more into just wrapping up Illinois and Iowa in part 2. So let's do just that. So Penn State wins the game 30-13 over Illinois. And the Nittany Lions, did they take a step back? How are they going to do against Iowa? Let's discuss it here as the live post-game show continues.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That is right. You are Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. And right now you can, as new customers get when you bet $5, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I'm Zach Seyko, your host, joined by special guest Zane Brancefield, as we're still looking for your comments to continue the conversation. Let's just wrap up Penn State and Illinois before we talk about the Hawkeyes of Iowa. And comments continue to come in. Defense is solid, still giving up big plays, though I agree there were some big plays surrendered at times. But Illinois, I think, just called in the moment. I said that's nobody's fault. They called a good play for that right scheme that Penn State was doing. And that's what's going to happen sometimes. Penn State would run zone. Zach Wheatley would back off. Kalen King would drop into a hook zone. And then Illinois would just find the soft spot. That's really what it was. So it wasn't a matter of Penn State just being lackadaisical defensively. They had to play their assignments, and Illinois just won that down. But where I will criticize them is the lack of tackling. Just at times, the arm tackling was atrocious. It really was. And then Penn State looking like they had it bottled up at the line of scrimmage for a loss or a 1 to 2 yard game. And somehow, some way, Illinois was able to break that off for 5, 10, 15 plus yards. And it's like, okay, that a better team will make you pay for that. We also have another comment, and appreciate your thoughts. Should have been 42-7, sick of late fourth quarter trash touchdowns from opponents. You got to love it. The Penn State was still able to hold the cover, right? Good teams win. Great teams cover. They covered that 14-point spread. So that was never in doubt, right? And neither was the win. At the end of the day, I knew Penn State was going to win this game. It was just a matter of by how much. And it only ended up being, and they really should have turned John Paddock and Illinois, the backup quarterback for Illinois. They really should have turned them away late in the game. So I agree that the score should have been much more in favor of Penn State given the game flow of it. We have a comment from D Flat. Don't see us winning the Big Ten this year. While they didn't struggle versus West Virginia and Illinois, it just doesn't look good enough at times. Maybe they'll gel as the season goes on. That's the only hope. Appreciate that comment. And I think we should start with that because that does wrap up what we think about Illinois and kind of pivots into the Iowa Hawkeyes. For Penn State, they have all the talent in the world. You got a first-round pick at quarterback. You got 2 first-round picks at running back. You got a first-round pick at left tackle. Offensive line, jury's out on them. I can see Hunter Norzak getting drafted. Sal Wormley, Caden Wallace. Maybe those guys aren't necessarily 2 or 3rd-round picks, 2nd or 3rd-round picks, but those guys are all going to be on NFL rosters. Venga Ioane, JB Nelson will still be around for the time being, right? They're still younger players on the roster. Keandre Lambert-Smith has played his way into a draft pick. Trey Wallace has played his way into a draft spot as well. And then defensively, Chop Robinson, Kalen King, Abdul Carter, right? Adisa Isaac. All those guys are eventually going to be high draft picks. So the talent is there. Yes, I agree. There needs to be some more gelling, not defensively, though. Offensively. Penn State held them to 13 points and, again, forced 5 turnovers against the Fighting Illini. The offense, whether it's chemistry for block, I think chemistry for blocking is the biggest thing. The wide receivers, the offensive line, tight ends, got to get on the page of setting things up for the running attack. And that's really what it is because Drew Allar did have ample times. There were good pockets for him to sit back and read the defense. And it finally caught up to, and I wanted to point this out, and I had it in my notes. Drew Allar finally, it caught up to him where he was going through his progressions, and it actually hurt him. if he had stayed on Keandre Lambert-Smith, his first option, for a split second longer, Penn State would have had a big, I think that would have been a 50-yard plus touchdown. DeAndre Lambert-Smith was all alone, was wide open. Great play call by Mike Yurcich. So for the first time, we saw where Drew Allar going through his progressions and being a little too patient, I guess, or impatient maybe, because he doesn't lock onto his target right away. That being a little too impatient actually hurt him. He had all the day in the world. Sometimes he had 15 plus seconds to sit back there reading book and made the wrong decision or just overthrew a receiver, whether that was a tight end or somebody else. But yeah, Allar's decision making was a little bit questionable at times against Illinois.
Like you said, I agree with you. I thought his playmaking wasn't great. Play calling, I didn't think
He didn't
was
turn the
bad.
ball over though. He did not. He protected the football. He did a really good job with that, but he missed open receivers. Whether he threw to them, like he missed them on the target with the throw, or he just missed them by not looking at them.
Yeah, that's true. He didn't turn the ball over, which is crucial, especially like with that Illinois defense. Like that's the other thing people don't realize is Illinois' defense is actually a good defense. It's one of the better defenses in the Big Ten. But Penn State's offense, like the one comment about like needing to gel, like, and you said like offense does need to gel. Role players need to be formed. People need to know like where to go. Drew Allar's gonna, like, we know he likes to throw the ball to Lambert-Smith, but he's gonna find those other guys that he can trust and rely on, whether that be short distance, long distance, or somewhere in between. But it's just something that will happen over time. And despite Franklin always calling him like Steady Eddie, that's what he said at this one press conference.
Yeah.
I think Drew Allar still had some first away game jitters, first Big Ten start,
Yeah.
and like that's normal. That's allowed. He's a true sophomore starting quarterback at one of the
Third game starting, Zane.
Yeah, so that's fully understandable for him to be a little bit nervous about it, and that's fine. Like obviously, like you said, he goes through progressions. He likes to look at every single guy and like figure out who's open, who's not open. It's like if you see a open space, don't look at somebody else, just throw the ball. And I think Drew will figure that out over time, and I think Penn State can still have a good season. And there's still a lot of season left. It's the third game of the season. They're still learning. It's team's pretty young, like in certain like key crucial spots. Like Nick and Katron are still only sophomores, so they're still learning. They're not fully polished yet. Like Barkley didn't take off until his late sophomore year, junior season. So I think people should give the offense some time. They'll figure it out.
Yeah, they're very young offensively, and you have to build that chemistry. So you make it a very good point, saying I think we should finish up with the wide receivers here. So Nicholas Singleton should not have been your leading wide receiver today, or your leading pass catcher with three receptions and 49 yards. Tyler Warren did have a touchdown that came from Trey Potts. Quarterback number 2, Trey Potts, ended up throwing a touchdown. How about that? Keandre Lambert-Smith pretty quiet after 2 big games against Delaware, and mainly against West Virginia, but 2 solid games against them. They missed. The reason why I hesitated earlier in the post-game show, kind of deciding, okay, because Trey Wallace was questionable. Technically, he was available, but was kind of completely missing from action. So they felt like we don't know what happened specifically, if he got banged up in the middle of practice or there was an injury lingering from the Delaware game or something he picked up from the West Virginia game. James Franklin is very coy when it comes to injured players, hurt players, because it does hurt the strategy, right? If Illinois sits back and they know that Trey Wallace had 7 catches for 72 yards against West Virginia, he is a threat in the passing game. Don't tell me he's not, because look how different it was when he wasn't on the field against Illinois. Penn State took a step back from its aerial attack. So Wallace is proving to be a lot more valuable than people might have thought originally. Here's the thought on Caden Saunders as well. Caden Saunders is basically a 5-star talent. The offense isn't good enough to keep talent like that off the field in favor for upperclassmen. So Keandre, Trey, and Saunders need to be your ones. Caden Saunders got a little more run this game, and I was surprised. Made some catches, got open. Caden Saunders is really good with his agility. Think of him more as someone, he is a really good slot type of receiver. We'll see how it progresses with Saunders. I don't think Saunders is going to transfer. I don't think he's upset about playing time. They're in a situation where they're going to play more tight ends, and play fewer wide receivers. And Liam Clifford has been in the program longer. Liam Clifford's a very good route runner. He had a first half saving catch to really keep the momentum going with Penn State. I know Penn State didn't score in its first 3 drives to start the third quarter, but Illinois probably said, man, we just gave up points when we didn't have to. Liam Clifford played a big part in that with that catch. And then Penn State got the ball back to start the second half. So that definitely rattled Illinois a little bit that they gave up those 3 points because of Clifford from Allar to Clifford there. But Caden Saunders, I think, still has time to grow. He's very good in short space. He's very good at getting open. You can press him because he's a smaller wide receiver, but good luck because he's able to shake a defender with the way that his agility is right out of the gate. So he goes 0 to 100 really quick. And that's what I mean by his agility. So he's not the overall speed. He's good, solid. I mean, he's 5'9", 170, 180 pounds. He's a smaller wide receiver. And that's what you're going to get out of it. He's no Tyreek Hill. Let me say that. But in terms of breaking off immediate press coverage, that's why Caden Saunders got some catches today, because Illinois was pressing a lot, and he actually works pretty well with that because he's good off the line of scrimmage. So I'm eager to see him get more opportunities. I really want to see Dante Cephas get involved. Transferred in Malik McClain, man, really, he ruined 2 drives for Penn State. 2 drops when they were right in the breadbasket for him to start the game, and then later on in the third quarter, and it's just like, Malik, you got to catch those. Maybe the second one was a little off center, but that second down play when Malik should have picked up a first, and the drive should have continued and extended, and he ended up dropping it, and that's gonna hurt your chemistry with Drew. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. I'm not saying that Drew's sitting back there and going, well, I can't target Malik here, but he's probably, when he's going through his progressions, he's probably instinctively going to say, maybe I don't target number 11, or maybe I don't lock onto him as long in this instance.
Yeah, the big thing, like Malik McClain, he was 1 for 6 today with 6 yards. Like, he should have easily had more than that. And he was targeted the most on the offense. So Drew evidently has trust in him. And 2 of those hit him in the hands. Like, if it hits you in the hands, he's a Division I football player. He's got to catch that football. And also going back to the other comment about talking about Caden Saunders being one of the wide receiver ones. Well, James Franklin, his not specifically, but he likes Trey Wallace and he likes Lambert Smith to be his guarantees. And then that third spot he just kind of has based off what practice. So we don't get to see a lot at practice, but Caden Saunders must not be having a fantastic practice, or James Franklin would start him, because he doesn't really play favorites like that. Yes, Liam Clifford has started and a couple other guys, but it goes based on the practice. Liam Clifford started a game and only caught 1 or 2 balls that game. He doesn't have a lot of catches. So starting in James Franklin's system doesn't mean a whole lot in that sense, because you're either going to play or you're not going to play. But Penn State will figure that out. And Malik McClain could be that guy if Drew Allar likes to target him, but you got to catch the football. And losing Trey Wallace hurt today too, but Penn State's got to pick it up. You got to have guys that step up when somebody's down, somebody to pick it up. And I think Penn State will figure it out. Like I said, it's the 3rd game of the season. They're still figuring out who's good at what, and they'll figure it out.
James Franklin wasn't kidding when he said our 2 main guys are KLS, Keandre Lambert Smith, and Trey Wallace, and then everybody else at this point is just a guy. That truly is that. I think that was on full display today, because when Trey Wallace wasn't available, Keandre Lambert Smith had a more quiet game. Nobody else stepped up, and that's how your leading receiver became Nicholas Singleton. The tight ends are busy being extra blockers. They went out for passes a little more often. Drew Allar missed them, and this is a good comment to go along with that. Allar wasn't great. He didn't stink up the joint either. The offense will be better at the end of the season. Michael, I think you're spot on with that one. But I think that really wraps up Penn State and Illinois. They got the win. They're 3-0. They're 1-0 in Big Ten, most importantly, because in order to get to that Big Ten championship, you have to be flawless. You got to be 8-1 at a very minimum, 9-0 when the Big Ten East is full of Michigan and Ohio State. That's just the way it needs to be. So now let's talk about that Big Ten West opponent, who could be in the Big Ten championship by virtue of the West just being abysmal on that side of the conference. Before we get to that, let's hear from our sponsor of today's episode, and that is Athletic Brewing Company. And like Athletic Brewing Company, changing the game when it comes to non-alcoholic beers, let's talk about a game changer from Penn State versus Illinois. And I'm going to go different this time because I nominated the defense the first time with 5 turnovers, but it is nice to feel confident in the kicking game. I'll give Alex Falcons his due credit. Other than the blocked field goal, that's fine. Jerzon Newton really skied high to get a piece of that football to block it, but Alex Falcons was accurate. I wasn't sitting there sweating that Penn State was going to miss a kick. And you know what? Settling in, Falcons was hitting 50-yard plus bombs in warmups. So Penn State fans and Penn State in general should just feel good about the kicking game moving forward. And that's why he's your game changer today. And Athletic Brewing Company is your game changer when it comes to non-alcoholic beers. They're fit for all times. You can drink them anytime, anywhere, make any activity enjoyable, like watching your Penn State game. No hangovers ever. You can find Athletic in store, online, and at bars around the country. They produce over 50 different styles of craft non-alcoholic beer, including IPAs, golden sours, and so much more. And Locked On wants you to take advantage of a special offer with your first online order. Get 15% off when you use promo code Locked On at athleticbrewing.com. That is promo code Locked On at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. And Locked On College Football Kickoff Live airs every Friday, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find it across any Locked On College channel to get all the latest implications in college football, previews, storylines, you name it. Locked On College Football Kickoff Live, available on this channel and whatever Locked On College channel, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time every single Friday to preview the weekend. So I was able to make a guest appearance going into, because this is Penn State's first test, and they passed. They didn't get every single answer right, but they passed. And now that next one becomes the Iowa Hawkeyes, and the Iowa Hawkeyes are a much better defense. Offensively, I'm not worried about them. I am not worried about Iowa in the slightest, because their offensive coordinator, right, Kirk Ferentz's son, you got to average 21 plus points to avoid getting fired or whatever the thing is. Cade McNamara wasn't all that good, held back Michigan, and that's why they pivoted to J.J. McCarthy. Now he's in an offensive system where he really doesn't get any additional help, because Cade McNamara, in order to succeed, needed the help of a talented Michigan roster. Now you kind of take a step back in an Iowa system that just doesn't make anybody look good offensively except tight ends, right? They produce a lot of NFL caliber tight ends for some reason. But the Hawkeyes' name of the game is defense, defense, defense. This is going to be a lower scoring type of game it's the whiteout, which helps. But I got to go back, and I said the same thing for the 9 overtimes going into Illinois, right? Emotions are going to be high. Penn State, before they lost that Illinois game in 2021, should have beat the brakes off of that Iowa team out in Iowa. And then you had making fun of players getting hurt, and Penn State's faking injuries and all that stuff. This is like Minnesota again, where Penn State remembers back to that 2019 game where Minnesota derailed Penn State's perfect season. Iowa derailed Penn State's. Now, I know the 2021 team was not that good. They finished 7-6, but that was the start of the downfall. Losing to Iowa, Sean Clifford getting hurt, Taquan Roberson, and now you get to exact your revenge in the whiteout, just like you did to Minnesota last year. So,
so Penn State obviously is playing the whiteout game against Iowa. So Penn State always plays well in the whiteout game. So I think we can win that game.
mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's going to be low scoring. Iowa's good defense. Penn State has good defense. And I think the biggest factor there is going to be, what did Penn State learn from today in their offensive scheme, and what are they going to learn from practice this week? And how well can they gel in that week? Time to figure out what's going to happen. It's going to help. Harrison Wallace should be back. I was looking at the injury report, and there's no new information, but hopefully.
And there's not going to be.
No, but hopefully he'll be back. That's the plan. And I think Penn State will be okay, because the offensive line will probably figure out some better blocking schemes. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen are still going to rush for at least 50 yards apiece, I would hope. And I think Penn State will be able to take them down. Like one of the comments is about how they think the whiteout will be the difference. And I think they're exactly right. Penn State has a winning record in the whiteout game, no matter who they play. And I think Penn State's going to be able to take that energy and just be able to use that to their advantage to beat Iowa. Iowa obviously has Penn State's number the last couple times. So I think Penn State's going to have that little chip on their shoulder. They're going to be ready to come out fighting. They got nothing to lose. They might as well try out some new plays. We had that trick play today with the Trey Potts touchdown. So I think James Franklin's ready to just start show people what this offense can really do and really take it to that next level.
Eli says, do we feel good about when Iowa comes into town next week? I love the turnovers today, but we got to get our run defense in check. Yes, we feel really good about Iowa coming into town next week. If you look at now, ESPN isn't always accurate, but just to kind of get an idea of what Penn State and Iowa, how from the analytics, what is that standpoint? Penn State wins this game 87% of the time. So if they played 100 times, Penn State wins 87 of them. So there are those outcomes where Iowa does win 13 times, but I like Penn State's chances here. And that we're doing this live, right? So Iowa is currently playing Western Michigan. It is 14-10 Hawkeyes. Iowa has thrown 2 picks. Cade McNamara has 2 interceptions. He's 5 of 13 against Western Michigan. I'll say that again, against Western Michigan. So take a Penn State team who just forced 5 turnovers against Illinois. Iowa, struggling offensively, only has 14 points at home and 2 interceptions already in the first half against Western Michigan. I'm not concerned at all. I'm really not. I like Penn State chances a lot. It's going to be a low-scoring game because Iowa's defense is really good. They play good zone. And I actually like this matchup for Penn State because the zone. So Iowa gambles with this by running the zone. They are going to gamble that they are going to get more turnovers with that. Secondary defensive backfield is really good, and I'm excited to look and study this game and this matchup a little more further. But just as far as early thoughts go, Joel Klatt brought this up. Iowa likes to play a lot of zone coverage, zone defense, so that they can take advantage of turnovers. But Drew Allar has not turned the ball over to this point. There were some close calls against West Virginia. That's fine. One of them was his fault. So we could say that, yes, maybe to this point, Drew Allar should have 1 interception. But for a true sophomore quarterback who's only started 3 games in his career, pretty efficient with the football and taking care of it. Zane, we're going to just kind of wrap this up in a couple of minutes here. Promise to go live from 5 to 6. So we only got a couple minutes left. Let's hear again from our sponsor of today's episode, and that is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. New customers, take advantage of this. When you bet $5, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So get ready for the NFL season. It's already started. It's already here, but you can still get this offer. Just bet $5. You get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. So let's bring it all together here, Zane. Gritty, not pretty, but Penn State has to win these kinds of games in order to stay perfect, okay? Illinois likes to play ugly football. Brett Bielema has traditionally played ugly football. Sure, the offense has changed. It's more of a spread look rather than that under center, 8 offensive linemen, ground and pound. We saw that in 2021, but they've made some changes. They brought in different coordinators that have not reflected that traditional scheme. But to go on the road, Drew Allar's first road start, we knew those were going to be tough challenges coming in. Then you watch the tape. Illinois is significantly, Zane, I know you brought up the point that Illinois' defense is one of the better ones in all of the Big Ten. They lost so much from a season ago. They lost the entire secondary that made them a top. Once upon a time, they were near the top 15 and the top 25 last season. They lost their defensive coordinator, Ryan Walters, who's now at Purdue. So Illinois took a significant step back, but it's hard not to agree to say that, yes, Illinois is still going to be a sound defensive team. I still think the responsibilities on Penn State, the run blocking, you got to use the run to set up the pass. You have 2 first-round picks in the backfield. There is no reason the offensive line shouldn't be a little bit better. I still think there's some chemistry issues. JB Nelson starting for the first time. Hunter Norzad has never been a center in his life. He played tackle for 3 years at Cornell, then moves to guard to the interior and then becomes a center. He's a starting center for the first time. When are we going to talk about that? Hunter Norzad is as intelligent as they come, but he's playing a position for the first time in his college football, his football career, period. I think the chemistry of the offensive line is something to keep an eye on as Penn State moves forward. But Zane, I like this game against Iowa. I think Penn State right now, at least the early betting lines were Penn State is a 10.5-point favorite. I think they cover that. I don't know that 5 turnovers are going to show up like they did against Illinois, but Penn State should at least force 2 or 3. They can pick off Cade McNamara at least twice and then maybe get a fumble mixed in there as well. Iowa's defense is going to be a little more unforgiving if Penn State can't find things. I hope Trey Wallace is available because Penn State, Dante Cephas, Malik McLean, Liam Clifford, even though Clifford had that big catch, didn't really show much more promise after that. So if he's banged up, that is a big deal for the passing offense. So if the running game is going to let you down and then the passing offense is going to be significantly hampered, I can see right now, I would sit back and say I'll do more research as the week goes on, Zane. But I would say something like 24-10, 27-10 Penn State. I think that's fair right now at this point in time where we are September 16th on a Saturday, 1 week away from this game for the whiteout.
Yeah, I can get behind your 24-10. I was going to say at least a 14-point favor for Penn State. I think McNamara is better than Altmaier, but I still think Penn State's going to.
Altmaier, I think he's in a bad system. If he was on Iowa, Altmaier would look a lot better. Bad decisions, but he does have all the athleticism in the world, and Illinois just doesn't help him out. So
I think Penn State easily wins though this week. I think we'll be fine. Penn State will figure it out as they always do. It's Penn State whiteout anyways.
Yeah, I can guarantee you a win. It's just a matter of what Iowa's going to do to see if they can cover those points. And that spread's probably going to shift. I think the Sharps are going to be on that one early. Penn State might even move to a 12 or a 13-point favorite when all's said and done before that game. But that's the whiteout, 7:30 kick on CBS. I'm excited for it. You and I are going to be both in attendance. We hope everyone enjoyed this post-game show here. We're going to do live post-game shows more often now here on Locked On Nittany Lions, so be sure to check that out. And we're going to be talking more Illinois, previewing Iowa over the course of the week right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. Thanks so much for joining us on a live post-game show.